Our question at this time concerns the title or the description of calling a clergy, calling them a man of the cloth. Perhaps you've heard that term before, and what one has asked is just exactly why is it that clergy are referred to as a man of the cloth? Well, that's a good question, and really in one sense I'm really not sure. I don't know why that would be so. I have a few ideas, and we're going to talk about those. But I would begin by saying that whenever you're talking about those in the Church of Christ and those who are preaching the gospel, those who are Christians, bear in mind the fact that when it comes to those folks, that they do not use such terms to talk about someone as a man of the cloth, or even the idea of a clergy and a laity distinction. Even such things as this really do not describe or do not describe accurately those who are preaching the gospel. And the reason I say that is because whenever you look into the Bible, you look into the New Testament, even the Old Testament, we find that God does not want men being called by flattering titles and such things as that. You go back even to the book of Job. In the book of Job, it discussed that Job said that I have learned not to call men by flattering titles. He just learned not to do that. That's just not the way to go. When it comes to such descriptions as reverend, for example, you look in the book of Psalms, in Psalm 111 verse 9, we find that holy and reverend is His name. Holy and reverend is God's name. In other words, it's not my name. And it's not any man's name. It's not right to call that person reverend in that sense. God is reverend, okay? And some versions have the term awesome. Holy and awesome is His name. Same idea. You talk about God, He is awesome. And what that means is He is that which fills us with awe, A-W-E, awe. And then you talk about reverend, to be reverent we ought to show that reverence to God. Again, we see that term father used. Jesus said in the book of Matthew 23, verses 8 to 10, to call no man your father upon the earth. What He had reference to was calling men by religious titles such as father and that type of thing. And yet how many people today use that kind of term to refer to some preacher or somebody, and they'll say father so-and-so. And you don't have a right to do that, see. We don't have a right to call man by the title like that, or reverend or so forth. Or, again, reverend, father, and those types of things. That's not for man to be, he's not to use that term. That's not it at all. And in fact, when you look into Scripture, somebody says, well, what do you use then? When you look into Scripture, what you see is folks just being called by their name. You read about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Paul, Peter, James, and Jude, don't you? You read about Barnabas and Silas and Timothy and Luke and all those. See? Epaphroditus and Onesimus and folks like that. Ananias you think just Aquila and Priscilla. I mean, just go down the list. Ananias, the man who converted the Apostle Paul, he just called Ananias, wasn't he? Andrew, look at the apostles. When you talk about Andrew and Simon and all those, Bartholomew and Matthew, we've talked about James and Thaddeus and Judas. See, they're just called by their names. And that's a nice, respectful thing to do. So someone says, well, why are men called those who might preach, or those in this clergy, as man has determined that term, why would they be called a man of the cloth? Well, really, it has to do with the historical background. And that is that those men at that time, due to their quote-unquote position, would wear certain clothing, they'd wear certain garb, and certain things that would signify or would designate them as someone different from everyone else in town. They would have different robes or whatever, or different things that they would wear, and that designated them as different or special from everyone else in the town. And so they were wearing the cloth, okay, the certain clothes that distinguished them. And because that's so, then you find that that's where that came from, that idea of man of the cloth. Because he wore a certain cloth, okay, or certain clothing that other people didn't wear. And in fact, as far as that's concerned, they wouldn't allow it in that sense. And so that's where a lot of that came from. But I wanted to use this opportunity just to show you that really whenever it comes to what's said in Scripture, what's said in the Bible, there's never a distinction between clergy, laity type situation. There's never somewhere where the preacher is held up in a higher plane than other people. He has some kind of special moniker, some special title or whatever. That's not to be. And so let's just respect what God has said. Let's respect His will. Let's respect the fact that every local church is composed of elders, deacons, and saints, Philippians 1:1, and just be satisfied with that.